award to the Hagerstown Fire Department from Local Government Insurance Trust, LGIT, the City of Hagerstown's insurance administrator, for the purchase of in-vehicle recording devices, cameras. These devices will record driver behavior and gather meaningful data for coaching opportunities to the staff of HFD. The grant will cover the cost of the recording devices and 1 year of the monthly monitoring cost.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll move into our work session. And up first, we have a request for support of the Black Economic Empowerment Summit of 2022. We have Mr. Clem Johnson with us today. Clem, if you'd like to join us up here.
Right here?
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. The floor is yours.
Oh. I just would like to seek the support of the city. This is the second event that I'm doing in the area, in the downtown area. Last year we did the Freedom Festival, which had a pretty good attendance, and a lot of the vendors did really well on that day and sold out. And so this March 12th, rented out the Maryland Theater, the ballroom, to have this summit to really showcase the Black-owned businesses in the area. We have people coming in so far from Frederick, Philadelphia, the DC area. And after the event, there's another event happening at the Cortland Mansion, being held by Daphne Smith. And that's gonna be more like a gala event as well. So it's gonna be a day of excellent.
So you gotta dress up.
You gotta dress up for that one. For ours, it's a little bit more casual, but the event is about education, empowerment, entrepreneurship. I've invited the mayor to come in and speak to the people to talk about what the city has to offer from a business standpoint and from a residential standpoint as well. And so overall, it's going to be a positive impact in the downtown area, and people get to see what it's like and support the area as well.
So, what is your financial request?
A financial request would be for $2,000.
Do you guys have any questions for Clem?
No, I think it sounds good.
Sounds good?
Sounds good.
Got your vote?
Yes.
Okay, are you guys okay with support for 2,000?
Absolutely.
Thank you for
Thank you.
continuing to bring information and positive vibes downtown.
Well, while we at it, can I borrow $500?
Now you're pushing.
Now you're pushing.
And Michelle just came back in the room, so.
My bad.
I'll tell you later. All right.
Thank you.
Y'all good?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, up next, 2021 Land Management Code updates. Sir Steve Buckmiller.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Okay, we had our public hearing for the annual package of text amendments. We did receive a couple of comments from the public and also from members of the mayor and council about a couple of specific items. The vast majority of the package received no voicing of concern from the public or members of the commission, or the mayor and council, excuse me. I don't think I need to go through it in any sort of detail. You've received your package. We did provide a memo from the Planning Commission further explaining their position on the traditional neighborhood design materials. And also I provided a little bit of additional clarification material on the issue associated with additional reports and studies associated when necessary for demolition requests for contributing structures in the historic district. And I think that pretty much covers it, so.
I know that there were some pretty major concerns expressed about the alleyways being a requirement and not a option. And I was just curious how if the council felt they wanted to keep it as a requirement, or, you know, judging by this letter here, it's saying a front-load garage new home price is about $295, where an alley-fed garage new home is $469. That's a pretty
Oh
significant
my goodness, it's huge.
I looked that over, and in my opinion, I think there was some assumptions that were made that aren't necessarily accurate when some of those comments were prepared. For example, the issue of density, lost density and all. The city's cluster subdivision requirements are based on reducing the size one for one if you do the lots of a smaller size. I don't understand in the application of our normal subdivision process and applying the cluster subdivision where anybody would lose any number of lots, because our subdivision ordinance does not require open space unless you get to a fairly high density for the overall development. The cluster allows the lots to be reduced in size as long as you take the land that's lost from the individual lots and set it aside as open space. So you're gonna have the same number of lots. And also, just to be clear on this, and I put this in the memo as well, is a couple of things. One is that particular proposal has two parts. One is certain proposals to loosen up our regulations to make them more developer-friendly to achieve the traditional design. And nobody has said anything about those. These are just kind of improvements to the overall design expectations. The part that is drawing the attention is moving the word from encouraged to expected. But expected is not required. It just means it's putting the planning commission to be in a better bargaining position to expect more in the way of traditional neighborhood design. And we're finding in recent projects that the development community is working with us. We have one townhouse development that is currently in review that is entirely traditional design. It's all going to be rear loaded. The houses are going to be fronting right on the street without driveways. We also have another project that's currently under review. It would be a large annexation where the developer is working with us to set aside a significant portion, about a sixth of the development, for traditional design, but it will still be mostly suburban design. So we want to emphasize that this will not result in everything being required or even close to it to being traditional design. It's going to push design more toward that direction and put the planning commission in a better bargaining position in reviewing site plans.
So you're telling me that legally expected is not mandatory?
Correct. Otherwise, it would be required. We would use the word required, and that's not the case.
I think that the difference of opinion that I have with those individuals that have provided comment on this, and I think I've said this for a long time, is not so much whether it has an alley or not, you know, because I like that design, but rather that it isn't full of cul-de-sacs, because we can look across this community and see just about every bad decision of suburban development where, you know, kids have to leave neighborhoods to go to other neighborhoods, and then we scratch our heads and wonder why our intersections are overflowed with vehicles. It's because roads don't interconnect between neighborhoods. And so whether they're perfectly square with alleys in the back with cars that can get to them, my primary interest is in discouraging cul-de-sacs, and I get it. Development to make more money when they sell the homes at the end of the cul-de-sac than they do the ones, you know, on the thoroughfare. But the thoroughfares are what keep government from having to spend money on improving intersections more quickly than they should, and allow public safety and public works and other services to more readily operate in and among those neighborhoods in the city network of streets than it otherwise would be able to do. So,
And I would point out that our subdivision ordinance, when it was rewritten a little over 10 years ago or so now, actually pretty much wrote all this stuff already in. It's already strongly discouraged that you do cul-de-sacs. It doesn't, but again, it doesn't prohibit them. If you've got like a weird neck on a piece of property and the only way into it is a dead-end road, it doesn't preclude it, but the ordinance as it's currently written, for the most part, already pushes toward this design. What we're doing is we're coming in with a few creative changes to help the developers come in with better and creative designs, and then just a single word to put the planning commission in a better negotiating position. Because technically, if the planning commission could, right now, the way the ordinance is written, demand everything be traditional neighborhood design based on the way the ordinance is written. Now, they're not gonna operate that way. They understand the realities of the situation. But they also don't want to be in a position where we're spending city resources and reputation in legal battles with developers either over nuances. So the idea is just to put them in a little bit better negotiating position. And also the vast majority, well, I wouldn't say the vast majority, a majority of the product out there in new development around the edges of the city on raw land still will probably be mostly suburban design. Because there are going to be tracts out there where, due to their location, existing surrounding development, it just doesn't make sense to do urban design. And also, what we found is as we've been studying various similar developments we would like to emulate, we found that those developments, even those have a significant portion of suburban design in them as well, because you have a tract that you're going to develop. They're not going to build, it doesn't make any sense to build alleys right up against the tract boundary and only have that alley serve one side of the street or one side of the alley. So what will happen and what we're seeing, and especially in some of the proposals that we're seeing here in the city, is that around the edges, you're still going to have the front-loaded more suburban design because they're backing up to another property. Doesn't make any sense to put an alley behind them. So even if we have a development that is mostly, if somebody comes in and says, we're with you, we really, really like the urban design, and we're gonna do it as much as we can, they're still probably gonna have 30% of their product that's gonna be front-loaded anyway, even if they're go overboard in cooperating with the ordinance. So it just puts the planning commission in a better negotiating position.
Do you guys have any questions?
Not on that item.
Okay.
On the other item, which you provided documentation for, which is the Cumberland example, two things I'll say. One, it has not changed my mind on this particular item. I think that the Cumberland example is overbearing. However, I say that only to the limitation that I don't have a map as to what the canal district refers to. And so I'm trying to apply what I believe or have read and believe the Cumberland example to be overbearing. I'm trying to apply that to like our entire urban area. So I don't know if Cumberland applies it to like 4 streets, in a canal area where it has a specific purpose, or whether in our case, you're trying to apply it to like a 20-block area without regard to the uniqueness of different, function of those different areas. And I hearken back to our historic district plan, which, had like, okay, these are A resource buildings, these are B resource, C resource, and D resource buildings within our urban core. And, I don't really see the direction of the weight associated with that approach in something of the Cumberland example, and I think that providing that carte blanche authority now to our historic district commission and offering that ultimatum, if it reads like this example, I'd want to know where it applies and to what it applies, and not, every person that comes in the door it applies to in that process. Because, I think of let's just think of the last half a dozen buildings you can relate that to in our downtown. And one of two things has really happened in just about every one of those scenarios. One, the city has paid, and paid dearly in some instances, to prop that up. Or two, it has led to the point where we are in a reactionary process of having to take it down. And I feel like all we do by this ultimatum is put an additional hurdle that further exacerbates winding up in one of those two positions. And so I haven't heard of late of the process being broken that we have sort of evolved into. And I'll say again, I'm not interested in going back in any manner to the process where those complaints used to be received, so.
Are you referring to the things that we've written in that are expected of a demolition application?
Yeah, mean, I just,
All right. And just.
and again, that's where I'm at.
Okay. All right, I could offer a little bit of comment to that if, that I think will address some of your concern. These expectations that are proposed, for the most part, are pretty much expectations already if a building is a contributing structure. If something that's a property that is what's called an E-resource, where essentially it has no historic value, and everybody knows it, HDC is gonna approve it, you know, they don't need to actually do, that level of review. It really, where it gets into it is whether the building itself is rated as A or B resource. Those are the ones that make up the fabric of the historic district, and once they're lost forever, and they can't be replaced, and it's a permanent loss to the district. So the idea is that it ought to be documented, and also, I will point out that there are A and B resources that the HDC has done tours of because somebody was interested in tearing down a building given its condition. And they went into them and they said, you don't need to document much, just get your application in, because they were practically fleeing the building themselves. The HDC is very reasonable. They have like 25, I put it in the memo, there's like 25 demolitions they've done in the last 20 years or so, and they've approved almost all of them. And some of them didn't need to provide much documentation at all because the situation was apparent. Even if it was a historic building, it was quite obviously shot. A couple of the buildings down on Antietam Street that have gone down in the last few years are good examples. The HDC actually arranged to take a tour of one of them, and every last one of the members of the board came out of it saying, we're not standing in the way, take it down. So what this does really is it protects the process on those borderline cases to where if the building comes down, it really ought to be based on an objective analysis. And that's what we're trying to get here, is to get away from the only material on the record is essentially a sales pitch from the property owner or the developer, whereas it ought to be more of an objective-based decision. And a lot of times, and especially the provision about getting additional outside advice on the process, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to tip in the way of keeping the building. The analysis may come back reinforcing the applicant's request or numbers anyway, and it'll give them even more documentation to justify bringing the building down. So,
I
Put the
mean,
building down on Jonathan Street.
which one?
That we took down, that was the one that was leaning out into the street.
That's not, if that's the one I'm thinking
No,
of.
it's not in the story, but I mean,
But-
we got an outside opinion on the building
Yeah,
and came back being the same opinion that.
yeah, yeah,
I was just using that as an example, using
Okay.
an outside.
yeah.
I mean, I hear that term objective, and then I hear that, you know, here's the examples that we've had, and then I read the Cumberland example, and that is not as flexible as you've identified that we've been, and it brings me back to that question. If we've navigated that course without this to date successfully, what's the necessity? And when I think of the use of the term objective as it applies, you know, again, I go back to how we've applied it in just about every circumstance, whether it be, you know, we've applied that objectivity often in our urban core to those projects that we proceed to move forward on out of interest and or necessity. And so I look at the old YMCA, which sits empty, right? Nobody's applying anything to that, and it clearly falls within the guidelines of what's being, you know, suggested here. To the converse, you know, we're set to take down structures, rightly so, for a large, you know, commercial investment project over on Baltimore Street. And so I just look at that and think to myself, you know, that's just two examples where I feel like we pick and choose. And I don't want to apply the standard, because what you're saying now is it really applies to A and B, but once we put this in, it's gonna apply to E. And E's probably gonna get through the process, after some delay and postponement that otherwise wouldn't happen, because now they've got to go through this process when others, would otherwise, be more proficiently escorted through the process. And so I don't see anything that's broken that requires me to say, yeah, what I want to do is add to that burden of process and obligation to the property owner, more so than already exists.
Just so I'm clear, the examples that we provided in the memo of Gaithersburg and Cumberland, just wanted to mention that we put them in just to show that other jurisdictions are doing this or something similar to it. We recrafted the language here to be a bit more simplified. Are you saying that the language that we came up with here is not amenable enough?
I'm saying that the examples you've provided don't give me the warm and fuzzies, that we are maintaining that course of absolute flexibility that we have maintained without this necessity of this language to date. Nor do I believe that we are going to maintain an absolute essence of objectiveness to every application through the door, that, like it or not, the reality of the situation, that it largely happens to rest with what's the interest level in the project, what's the product that's coming, and then sort of decide through that process of just what the level of necessity. And I'd like to say that that doesn't exist,
Right.
but that's the reality, and so I don't see adding this language that's going to only, I don't know, be most largely applied to the smallest player in the most profound effect is a necessity, if we're not going to acknowledge that we're likely not going to do that in every case in the largest interest areas.
Would it
So.
satisfy your concerns if we specifically wrote this to where it would apply to A and B resources only?
Any measure of adding this language, I'm opposed to. Maybe that's the simplest way to
Just
say
adding
it.
another level
Because as a matter of just general process, if you're asking the HDC for a certificate of hardship in order to justify demolition, the stuff that's listed here is really nothing particularly new. It might be a little bit more detailed, but if someone is applying for a certificate of hardship for demolishing a building in a historic district that's a contributing resource, there is a need to demonstrate why it needs to come down, because it won't create a return, its condition is too far gone, whatever. Some of that is already built into the process now.
It
What
is.
you're seeing here is maybe just a kind of a clarification and slight expansion of what the standard already is used by the HDC.
Yeah, well, forcing the applicant to pay third parties that the commission chooses on how it will be applied, I don't have an interest in that.
The alternative is if the HDC is not satisfied that the standards are met, then they're going to deny the demolition, whereas maybe they could approve it if they had additional materials.
Didn't this change come because of a request by someone who made an application and felt it wasn't fair that it ended with the Historic Commission? Somewhat?
Yeah, I'd rather not get into details of the particular case, but yes.
Understood.
And-
Like I said, then of the last 20 cases, fortunately, it appears that the process is working without the necessity for additional language.
How do you guys feel? Are you okay with keeping it as is?
And just so staff is clear as well, when it comes to the outside party stuff, I need to correct something I mentioned to you in my previous appearances with you, is I said that the HDC doesn't have any authority. Technically, the HDC has some of that authority written into the ordinance already. The problem is that what it doesn't have is a budget to do it. So because the HDC can order studies of historic buildings, things like that, That's already in the ordinance, but the problem is that if this body is inclined to move forward with it and was okay with the city footing the small bill that will come up every once in a blue moon over it, it could be handled separately, differently through a line item in the budget. The problem is, this is rare. It happens once in every blue moon. Is it really practical to budget $400 or $500 into the HDC's budget every year, and 9 out of 10 years it doesn't get used?
But will it continue to be rare with the increased interest in downtown due to the new stadium and the development around that? Will there be more interest in acquiring parcels that would suit the purpose if they were torn down to increase economic activity downtown?
Well, there are a number of different ways that you can obtain an approval for a demolition from the HDC. One is through what's called the public benefit. And to give you an example, when the Edison building came down to build the addition to Barbara Ingram School, it was building an addition to a public high school. There's a specific exemption for public improvements made into that. Another one is, and probably, this is probably half of the applications we get, it's just abundantly clear the building is shot and it's just not serviceable and will need to come down regardless. And then you also have a provision we have written into the ordinance, and I have all this stuff listed in our memo as well. We actually have a provision in our ordinance that's unique to Hagerstown, which we call the Major Economic Development Opportunity Provision, where if you've got a game changer, major development that is going to produce jobs and revenue, massive jobs and revenue downtown, then that takes precedent in the process. We've used it one time, and that was when the Maryland Theater came in. The building where their ticket booth was is a contributing resource, but it was standing in the way of this major expansion of the Maryland Theater. It qualified for the MEDO, and it was demolished as well. So there's no shortage of ways that you can have buildings removed in the historic district. It's just that at some point, the preservation and the purpose of the HDC does kick in. And and I want to clarify, the major economic development is for literally major game-changing uses, not just I want to do something else with the property. Because that's part of what an HDC historic district is, to protect the historic resources from unnecessary, and I emphasize that, unnecessary loss. And that's all that is, so.
I'm with Kristen, if it ain't currently broke.
Do you guys have any other questions for?
So what's the will of this body for the package as a whole?
Do you want to keep it as is, or do you want to make a change to the section in question?
I'm with Kristen on his proposal for that particular change.
For the outside consultant?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm okay with everything else, but.
And so we're clear, we're talking about the entire proposal, the expanding or the clarifying of the list of what's needed to submit for a demolition, the outside count, or how, is it all or part of that that you have a concern with?
I have a concern with all of it, and I think that you accentuated my concern in the last comment that when we have needed the will, we have found the way, you know what I mean? And we've written things to do that in all kinds of ways to accomplish that, and I think that's a good thing. And the Maryland Theater is a prime example. My concern, I think my primary concern with this is if we write it this way and write it this way, the only person it affects is exactly that person you referred to in your last comment, which is the little guy
Right.
that wants to do something sort of simple and just doesn't have the will or ability or influence or expectation to get that change to happen. I guess I think that's been my entire concern from the outset is, you know, they're not gonna have that support in whatever framework you want to frame that word to get it to happen.
So you want that entire provision struck?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep,
I'm fine with everything else, though.
okay. So everybody's good with,
Everything else?
yep.
Yes.
okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did a great job.
Up next, the recommended amendment to transportation element of the 2018 comp
Did you write
plan.
that down?
Good.
Every once in a while he says something.
It was profound.
It's better be 7 years.
Hi. This is about the comp plan amendments that we had the hearing. We didn't have any input at the hearing, and while the record was open. So now, I need to know whether you're ready to move forward with approving the resolution at the end of the month to amend the transportation element of the comprehensive plan.
I am.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Good.
Don't get up yet.
No,
Sometimes it takes 30 seconds.
All right, and then,
I'll get up and do
are you
it.
doing sustainable
I'm
communities?
hitting for Megan, yes.
Okay.
All right, so now it is time for us to renew Hagerstown's Sustainable Community Plan. This is a document that's required for the city to have in order to be eligible for community legacy money and for the Strategic Demolition Fund. Basically, revitalization grants available through the Department of Housing and Community Development at the state. We first created something like this back in 2002, and then it was renewed in 2012 and 2017. They're on a 5-year cycle now. And so it's time to do it. We kind of lost track of the email that told us about a month ago, and it's due now at the end of this month. So we've been furiously working the last few weeks. And so with the sustainable community area, you have a designated area, and I noticed the map didn't make it into this package. But it's basically the urban core of the area, as well as the eastern part of the west end, the western part of the east end, the south end, and the southern part of the north end, and then everything in between, which is the downtown and a lot of industrial kind of areas. You had to, when you first designated that area, it had to be based on certain demographic issues, as well as areas that you're striving to try to revitalize, and so that's where that boundary is. We're not proposing to change that at all. So you have that area, which is the area where you're eligible to use community legacy and strategic demolition fund money. Then you come up with a revitalization plan for that area. And so our revitalization plan, which includes goals, objectives, and strategies, the main framework comes from the city's comprehensive plan, where we talk about revitalization things in the plan. And then the objectives and strategies from the 2017 plan were guided by the comp plan again, as well as the community city center plan and the work groups that we had formed in 2012, the input we got from them. So for this renewal, our plan is to continue with that main framework that comes from the comp plan and update the objectives and strategies based on what we heard from our 2 work group meetings last week, and the notes from those meetings are in your package here. The Mayor and Council's strategic plan, and as well as projects and programs Mayor and Council have been contemplating with the federal ARPA, and weave all of that new information into this framework and have that be what we submit to the state.
I don't know what I walked into.
Now, on the 22nd, we will need for the Mayor and Council vote to forward it on that day.
I'm good with the update.
Okay.
Are you good with this?
Yes.
Great.
So under
That work-
housing,
Work group notes.
I mean, I understand there's a need for a year-round homeless shelter, I get that, okay? I don't particularly get it to be in a downtown core.
Well, the sustainable community area is much bigger than that. I don't know
I
where
mean, you
they're,
got you got the west end of the west side of the east end and the east side of the west end, and, right,
South
I
and
got
north,
it,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
but I'm just saying, yeah, so, I mean, I understand everything else, so I'm fine with it. But I just think that if you're trying to revitalize an area, and make it a quality of life kind of issue, that's one part of the quality of life that could maybe have a downturn because of the actions that we take, so. That's all.
Getting people off the streets is an improvement of quality of life.
I understand that concept, okay?
It's not a
I'm not
concept,
arguing that
it's the
we
truth.
don't need one, Madam Mayor. I'm just saying that it just shouldn't be in an area where where the revitalization is trying to happen. Thank you.
You guys good with this? Questions, comments?
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, review a central lot addition to the competitive negotiated sale program.
Good evening. Here to review Central Lot and the possibility of adding sites to the city's competitive negotiated sale program with the goal of transferring the property or properties to the private sector for redevelopment. Recently, Department of Community and Economic Development staff have received inquiries about the potential sale of a portion of the Central Lot to private entities for redevelopment for mixed-use buildings. The sites were previously included in the city center plan as catalyst project number 1 for Class A office space. A developer previously responded to a request for qualification, but that agreement has since expired. Included in your packet is a map of the central lot for Site A and Site B, and both locations are currently surface parking. Site A includes 48 parking spots, and Site B includes 16 parking spots. I'll mention that Site A is right next to the recently acquired 32 North Potomac Street, the former M&T building location. Including Site A would have no impact on the drive-through or the parking included with the M&T building. There should be a consideration of the impact to the parking. Currently, we're looking at a third parking deck, and the downtown parking related to the stadium parking is of concern. So we'd recommend that any proposal that was received have a contingency for at-grade or rear garage or an underground parking for creation of additional spaces for the proposed developments. And just a overview of the competitive negotiated sale process is this process facilitates the sale of city-owned properties with the goal of returning the property to private sector for redevelopment, highest and best use. The City of Hagerstown makes real estate available for purchase and redevelopment. Department of Community and Economic Development coordinates the process and accepts purchase applications, and Mayor and Council identify the properties to be offered for sale and ultimately approve any development concept and purchase.
I'm okay with Site B.
I'm okay with Site B.
I'm not okay with Site B.
Not at all. I mean, I think of transportation network and the number of cars that I see just on the Tuesdays I'm here that would have to load to take that left from North Potomac to Washington to wrap back around to get into the central lot, that's coming from Potomac. There is no alternative, and, I mean, you can stand up there and count the cars that take the left into this location at Site. I think Site B is a no-brainer.
Yeah. And I don't know what time of day this picture was taken, but my best guesstimate would be at lunchtime because of all the cars in the center of the central lot. Because they usually aren't that full unless.
But you don't think we
this
should
is
at
an
least
event at the,
accept proposals for A and see if we get a proposal that is worth pursuing?
No.
So,
It's a parking lot.
Fine with B.
I feel like we've migrated, am I wrong on that? That originally catalyst project number 1 was really focused more on the M&T building, am I incorrect?
There's two different phases. There's an A1 and an A2. A1 would be including all of Site A that you see in the exhibit, plus a portion of the M&T parking lot just to the north. And then A2 would be a second phase or a larger scale development aspect, including the M&T from the previous city center plan.
I could be mistaken. I thought when we originally did this, Catalyst Project 1 included the big square. And the thought would be whoever gets the M&T would offload their parking lot, our parking lot onto them, and it would become their private property. Maybe I just didn't envision that the result of that could be that that throughway would be negated by the build-out of the M&T side. And now that that's gone, you know what I mean, now that that opportunity portion of that is gone, I think it gives me increased concern. I guess I just didn't envision that would be part of that plan, that I thought the building would happen on the big M&T property and that ours would be there accompanying you know what I mean, parking area. But like I said, that's a busy throughway during peak hour, and somebody's gonna have to show me, and I'm looking at Rodney, some engineering thing that says, you know, intersection, left turn at South Potomac, or at Potomac, North Potomac and Washington is gonna go from, you know, X to X.
I think it's short-sighted to not accept proposals, at least to see what someone comes up with. I mean, if you look all over the state of Maryland and the country, people are putting their parking lots up for redevelopment. I mean, an empty parking lot is prime for redevelopment. And when we have all the movement we have going on right now, I just think it's short-sighted to not at least see what someone has to offer, if anything.
Man, that would have to be a big offer.
But what if it is a big offer? If we don't put it out there, we won't know.
We won't know if we don't,
Okay, I'm good with B, not with A.
I would need to see traffic movements. I mean, somebody's got to give me something that says, you know, and even when I walk by there, I see, you know, when we empty out of here, there's a dozen cars that leave the deck and cut across the street at that angle and go through. So somebody got to give me some number that says that left is gonna take that turn volume once that occurs.
Do we have to agree with decision today for A until further information from the engineering side? No?
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of
Do we have
information we
any
could
current,
gather.
do we have any current interest in A right now? Serious current interest?
We have interest in A right now, but we wouldn't be able to hear that interest without it being included in the CNS process.
I don't know. Throw up
We're not
some,
talking about the same interest that was there for the last
them townhouses.
4 years, right?
No, this would be a different developer.
I say throw a road closed sign right there where it dumps onto Potomac for a week and see how people feel about it. I mean, I don't know how else you
they'll be
like
cutting
get an
that road.
idea of,
We have 2 counts we could do, just see how many people
Yeah.
are coming in there.
I'd be interested. I mean, I'll give you an example, Burhan's, you did that analysis of how many people cross the street at the knot. I mean, it was like 812 hours. I mean, that number was like staggering to me. I would have never said, go do some stuff over there if we wouldn't. So I'm just thinking of it like that, like.
And just another observation would be, we're gonna be putting our customer service and DCED group in the M&T building. And the last thing we want are people to do what they do now and park on the street with their flashers on to conduct business if there was nowhere to park.
Or
But
suddenly
that
use
parking
that
lot
as
would
the cut.
still be there.
I'd be interested in hearing something on someone who has interest in an executive
Yeah,
session.
I'd be interested too.
We already.
Because this is the first I've heard.
The townhomes, courtyard or something.
Yeah, we did. That's how this came about. We already did. Yeah.
You know,
What?
Site B was looked at 10 years ago for a possible location on the Board of Education, so,
Well, I text Shelley to see, because I'm fairly certain that she was okay with it, but it's 11 o'clock at night where she's at, so I don't know if this needs to wait, if we're 2 and 2.
Oh, yeah, most definitely you should wait. You can wait a week.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, request for exception to city water and wastewater policy.
Can I just, we're gonna wait a week to do what?
Just have it listed in CMS.
could I?
I just wanna make sure they.
Could I offer to get a closed session on, an executive session on potential interest?
We already had one,
We did,
yes.
on potential interest.
You did hear.
Where was
Yes.
I at?
You were here.
You were
Was I
here. Yes.
You're standing at the door.
But-
Oh,
but-
that one. Oh. Oh. Yeah,
Okay, so B,
I'm still fine with B only,
okay, are you guys okay with B?
but I think A is a.
Okay, so B is okay, can we wait till next week for A?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I remember now.
Standing at the door.
All right,
Probably didn't remember because I figure it's never.
Water, wastewater exception.
So we're here to review a request for exception to the city water and wastewater policy for TC Mid-Atlantic Development 5 LLC. It's just some information about the project. Developers TCM, which is Trammell Crow, Mid-Atlantic Development 5 LLC. It's a speculative industrial warehouse totaling 1 million square feet, located at Route 63, just north of the intersection of Maryland Route 40. The site is approximately 99 acres. Trammell Crow expects to invest $100 million into the project, creating nearly 500 jobs.
What number do you say they are?
This is letter G on your MRGA map.
What number are they on this one? On the map you gave us, what number?
We're gonna stay.
This is number 3.
Okay,
Number
that's better.
three.
What number?
3.
Number 3.
The estimated water use
Okay, I got you.
is 2,400 gallons a day, which is 12 EDUs. And the expected construction schedule would be, that they're under feasibility study currently, and upon a water approval, they would proceed with settlement and begin development of the site immediately. The location of the site is in the agreed-upon boundary adjustment of the median range growth area, which was reviewed by the city and county in June of 2020. And the map of the location is included in your packet as letter G or number 3.
What I handed out, just as an easy reference, is where this parcel is located in reference to Sheets at Hewitt's Crossroads. Kind of puts it
Got it.
into perspective.
So it is currently in the MRG,
It's not currently in that.
proposed from 2020,
Correct,
but that has not been adopted yet.
Correct.
It's in the new map of the adjusted bubble that we agreed to.
that is correct.
Or, I'm sorry, it's outside of the new map of the bubble we,
It's
Okay.
located in, it's the adjustment, it's an addition area that we did include. But it's
in the
not
proposed map.
correct.
For 20, that was agreed in 2020. Here it is 2 years.
I'm trying to say it right, and it's not. This one.
Yeah.
One of the things that I would point out, kind of going back to consistency with a lot of what we've talked about in the last couple of months, is Doug mentioned that it is 2,400 gallons per day, 12 EDUs. And so on the motion, the recommended motion, we do state that as a maximum EDU, trying to get back to managing capacity and that sort of thing. So, and if they don't move, this approval does expire.
So, this is a, and I realize that we sort of generally agree, but this is a one more, you know, and this is another one. To the vast array of the ones that come in under exemption clauses, right? And I'm just gonna tell you guys the same conversation that I had with Nancy directly on the phone, a couple of weeks back when I was trying to wrap my head around this, post 2+2 committee meeting and the number of these that we're getting, and the clear direction that lands we thought were gonna gobble up lots of EDU are just not doing that now, right? And that may change 10 years from now, but I think to put it in the simplest terms, and to also recognize comments that Bob has made in the past of, you know, in what lifetime are we gonna get there as applies to the extension of our services and as it applies to county economic development? To me, it became real simple. We want everybody out there to understand that water and sewer is a finite resource that we have. It is limited by state directive. It is expensive and difficult legislatively, regulatory-wise to grow. And we need to make sure, we need to make sure that we have enough to serve the city of Hagerstown first. Our water and sewer system has to be able to have enough capacity to serve everything we're obligated to serve in the city of Hagerstown now. And instead of continuing with this request after request coming in, and now we're up to what, 10 exceptions? to the rule.
Something like that, yeah.
We need to simply say, look county, look developers. There's one growth area, and I realize we've got the MRGA and the LRGA, but really, as I thought about it, I was like, to a great degree, why do we have such concern over that outside of that larger growth area? Because we have utilities in that growth area, right? The bigger one. And as long as we are preserving adequate capacity, as quantified, as we should quantify it to serve the city and our growth area, then the rest, I think for me, I have to question what great concern do I have, whether it's for a 200-house development or, you know, a manufacturing plant, because it's out there and, you know, let's say there's 1 million gallons and we say, look, we need 800,000 of it, and that's ours. County, there's 200,000 that we have the ability to serve outside of our area. We don't really care where you go with it, but that's the number. I feel like we are engaging in choosing, you know what I mean, and augmenting that process that's really, that's the area we serve. And so there's gotta be a way to simplify that and for you to say, Mayor and Council, you have 15 million. Mayor and Council, you have obligated yourself to 11 million at this point. Mayor and Council, you need 3 million to fill out your growth area. So Mayor and Council, you have 2 million left. And anybody out in our existing service area that would like to have that on a first come, first served basis within that defined growth area, can request it. Like I'm getting a little lost in the origination of tying that extension of services to annexation, if now we've created 10 exceptions to that purpose, which means all that does is every one of these land at this table, and then we create a new exception for it. When what we're really talking about is managing our long-term capacity. And so I'd like to get there. I think we can. I think it's a much simpler approach, I think, for both city and county staff and the development community. And so I don't know how many more of these ones are going to happen, but I mean, I think it's futile for me to continue to sort of fight, you know, if you will, the logistics of those ones if you're telling me that there's capacity, you know, to provide for it. You know, and they still have to fill out those forms, you know what I mean, pre-annexation, but I don't know, the conceptions have gotten broad at this point, and the purpose has changed dramatically. And I don't know that we have a great handle on what our capacity, you know what I mean, finalities are for the foreseeable future.
I don't think we do either.
Can I interject for a moment, just to get back to this? In 2019, we asked the county to come up with what their priorities are for the boundary. And so we went through a months and months and months exercise with city and county staff. And what we came up with was adding the green and removing the red, based on if this requires this much capacity to serve, then what can we take out that balances it out? And so that's what this whole process was about. And then the plan was then to amend the comp plans to reflect that change. We haven't gotten to that point yet because there was a lot of stuff going on with joint service area changes, because it's more than just changing the boundary when we update the plan for this. We have to do all this analysis about what's the blank got left, all that kind of stuff. So that's why we were waiting, because the JSA changes that we just made, that affects all those calculations. But we had asked them to tell us, what are your priorities? And this is what they told us. And this particular one is in one of those areas they said was their priority.
And I guess I hear that, but it seems like just about every couple of years, those priorities change. And it seems like politically, frankly, the influence of property owners out in these areas that have development interests, the priorities change. And I feel like we're chasing properties rather than capacity.
Right, which is why math is the only solution here.
I
mean,
completely
that's
agree.
it. I mean, you have a finite amount and this is what we're using, and this is what we need, and this is what's left over, and that's what's available to everybody else. And that's what we have to do, but on this issue in particular, okay? Since this was the new MRGA that was agreed upon 2 years ago almost now, and we haven't changed it yet formally because of the issues with joint service areas and things like that Kathy just mentioned, then I'm inclined to believe that we are going to get here, and it is gonna change again.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like 5
it is
years
gonna
ago.
change again. It's gonna change again in 2 more years.
5 years ago, we were
but-
talking about the Robinwood corridor, right? I mean, that's all anybody talked about. And now suddenly I've got 7 projects around the sheets at Hewitt, what nobody was thinking about 7 years ago. It's just very different, and I'm getting tired of chasing property lines, rather than capacity.
Again, we gotta use math, and we've gotta
amounts.
figure it out that way.
Well-
But I'm fine with this one.
Perhaps what our approach can be on other ones that come before us, if it's not inside the proposed MRGA, then we hold them until we do the things that we said we were gonna do. I'm scheduled to do preliminary presentation for code amendments on March 8th. Come back again in June so we can adopt them for July. Part of that includes how we, capacity management. Part of that will include how much of capacity that was assigned when the policy went into place that we can take back, if you will. So I think by the time we get to June, which really isn't that far away, that we might have some better numbers or some numbers that we're more comfortable with. So,
I think that's great.
yeah, so in the meantime, anything that's outside of that proposed line, we'll set on. If it's inside of that proposed line, we'll bring it forward based on if there's an exception that applies.
And if there's a wait, there's a wait.
On
Like I
the
said, I
ones
don't-
outside.
Yeah.
Outside the proposed.
And we did have this discussion with county planning and county administrator, was that last week, week before?
Yeah, it was about 2 weeks ago.
And they get it, but I think one of the things we want to do is, this needs to be a joint understanding, and we need to make sure that this body and the county commissioners are on the same page when it comes to this, which we both agreed may end up into this is water 101 kind of thing, to where we can educate each other on needs versus allocation, so that it's better understood that it's not just put water here, it means nothing. So that's what we're working towards in the next joint session, is not necessarily a discussion of the issues, it's more of an educational kind of thing, to where we can both talk about the same thing and with the same parameter.
And I think part of that discussion has to be future enhancements.
Yes,
or-
absolutely, and that was, we talked about all that as well.
Yeah, I
Because
completely agree.
with increased capacity comes increased necessity of infrastructure improvements, whether that be transmission mains or the plant itself, or on where does the wastewater go, even if it's
Oh,
to
yeah, I
their
mean, I
side
think
or our
there's this
side.
notion that if we can just pull some more out of the Potomac, we can easily send it.
That's
You're
correct.
right.
We-
There's
yes.
no-
And that's a public
that's an
perception too,
infinite
that we
number.
need to deal with.
Nancy, based on your proposal, I'm fine with this.
Thank you.
You guys good? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Hagerstown Fieldhouse. Rodney and Mr. John Weck.
He looks like Keanu Reeves a little bit, doesn't he? John Weck.
Good afternoon. John is back. John Wack from Eastern Sports Management. Him and his team have been very busy over the last few months putting together their Phase 1 work that we asked them to do. They're here a little ahead of schedule, actually. And they've developed a business plan, some initial design concepts, financial projections, feasibility study of the market, all those good things. So John's going to walk you through a PowerPoint of where we're at, and then we'll talk about where we want to go from here. So, John?
Awesome, thanks. Appreciate you guys having me back. If you recall, our original, we laid out that there were really 3 phases to developing a sports center. The first one is the one that we're at the very end of. The second one is getting some design documents up to a certain percentage point so that you can find out what it really costs. And then the third one is building it, and of course, lastly, operating it. So we signed up with you to complete phase 1. Within that phase 1, our deliverables were to confirm the market demand, to confirm the financial viability of the facility, write out a business plan for it, come up with a schematic design, put a budget together for what that schematic design would cost. Working with our partner, Pinnacle Indoor, we completed the feasibility study that found strong demand in the market. In particular, sports, soccer, lacrosse, basketball, volleyball, futsal, wrestling, and pickleball. That is not an exhaustive list, but that is some of the highlights. We validated the conceptual design for the number of fields and the number of courts, landing on 2 indoor turf fields and 4 basketball courts as a number that we think can be supported by the local market. Feasibility study done by Pinnacle recommended that you operate it privately so that you had the best industry best practices in the operation of the facility. And they also recommended that the capital stack for the project have the lowest possible costs. That didn't come out very well, did it? So we got lots of great community input. I've got it actually right here. I can read it off. Or at least I had it. Give me a sec. So this slide just shows a couple of the folks from the community and their feedback. In particular, it was showing the folks from the YMCA Lacrosse Association, from Game Time Hagerstown, and Hub City Volleyball Club, just as a couple of highlights. First quote was, with a new indoor facility, the number of new opportunities to grow lacrosse and other sports would increase significantly. A new indoor facility could bring a big economic impact to the city. Lack of indoor space in Hagerstown limits the type and size of events we can host. This facility would allow our teams to participate in many more activities. Advancing on. So taking the demand in the community, we come up with a business plan, and from that business plan, we come up with a schematic design. Really, this design is intended to be a graphic representation of a space program more than a final design. We would get to that in the next phase, but we needed to get everything down on the ground, make sure it fit on the proposed site, and then come up with a budget for constructing that based on those 2 pages of drawings. Came up with a 114,000 square foot pre-engineered metal building. It essentially is going to have 2 wings, one for the turf fields, one for the courts, and a center core area that would be 2 stories tall. On the hard court side of the building, it would be 4 basketball courts, convertible to 8 volleyball courts, could fit about 10 wrestling mats, and probably about 12 pickleball courts. And then over on the other side, 2 indoor boarded turf fields of a dimension that's typical in the industry, similar to the ones that they've had down in Frederick, similar to the ones we have in Fredericksburg, similar to the ones we have in Virginia Beach. The idea would be that we're playing as many different possible sports during the week and really maximizing local utilization, but then on the weekends run tournaments, particularly on the hard court side, a little bit less on the turf side. And then we wanted to make sure that the building design included enough revenue-enhancing areas so that the building would be financially viable. That included a very generous and healthy food and beverage area with lots of seating, party rooms, administration rooms, bathrooms, an esports area, something that we've started to add into our business plans for all the gamers, where we're taking the world of gaming and we're getting it to intersect with the world of sports. In these facilities, the primary product is camps, clinics for you to learn how to do the sports, leagues to get in some local play, tournaments to play against people from outside of the area. That structure is now being applied to gaming, and so we would create an area within this facility to do that. This is just a quick look. You guys have seen this before when we came in with the feasibility study on the first floor design. You see the two turf fields on the right. I think this building is right now, the plan is north-south, so that front entrance faces Memorial, thank you, south, faces south. So you've got the basketball courts over on the left side, the turf fields over on the right. It's funny, just today I was looking at the renderings of that. We may rotate those basketball courts 90 degrees or run the column line differently so that I can fit indoor field hockey in there. The column line right now is wrong for indoor field hockey, but that doesn't matter at this stage. And so you can see the various areas. We've got that large corridor connecting the two sides of the building where there's going to be a lot of seating for the food and beverage. We may actually make that a raised area so that folks can see out from when they eat to really anywhere in the building. So for the business plan, the guiding philosophy was to design an elite facility, run it professionally, and make everyone's experience matter. That's the philosophy behind all the facilities we run, and that is the guiding light in the business plan as we write it. The operation strategy is to maximize traffic and then leverage that traffic. We want as many local people coming through this facility as we can for whatever reason. Silver sneakers in the morning, the pickleball folks, the middle schoolers in the late afternoon, the high school kids around dinner time, and then the adults from
I caught the silver sneaker.
7 or 8. I didn't look directly at you, but I said it. And the adults come in 7 or 8. And then a real mix of traffic on the weekend. And hopefully, using the art courts, we can attract plenty of out-of-town folks on the weekend to the art court side of the building. We add in the fitness and the esports for local residents and to maximize revenue. Again, single sports on the weekends with critical mass for large tournaments, emphasis on food and beverage. Here's some of the renderings that the architects supplied. Gives you a feeling of the spaciousness right now. We do have a column line running down the middle. Steel is very expensive right now. By the time this ends up going to construction, hopefully it will come down a little bit, and maybe that column line can be removed, but removing the column line does add quite a bit of cost to the building. Right now, it's priced with a column line. Obviously, when you don't have a column line, it creates greater flexibility for doing all sorts of different things. And this side of the building in particular is intended more to be the multi-purpose side of the building. Convocations, cheer and dance, dog shows, car, whatever can go onto that surface, go in. It'll have a couple of bay doors at the back so you can load in and out of equipment. So it'll take about 3 years from doors open for this to stabilize, to come up to what would be not quite maximum revenue, but expected top line revenue. That's going to end up being about $3.5 million in gross revenue by the 3rd year. We're proposing a revenue share to the city, about $400K, and leasehold estate taxes of about $200K. That's about $600K, and at your all's borrowing costs with your amortizations,
20 year.
that would, I think I ran it at 25, but in any event, it's roughly in the neighborhood of 10 million. I think that you could safely borrow on it. I'm not suggesting that you do that. I think a lower number would be safer, but right now, looking at the financials, I think you could draw that conclusion. So we're right at the end of phase 1. I'm sure we've got a couple of I's to dot and T's to cross to make sure that we've got all the deliverables for phase 1 done. I've got we promised a certain number of renderings and other things that have specific numbers, and I have to go back through the plan and make sure we met those. I believe we've exceeded them. But the phase 2 now is what you would do to find out, okay, what does this really cost, right? The drawing that I've just showed you, that and another one, and the third one, the site drawing, are really all that we have had, and a construction narrative that you'll find in the packet that the architects had put together in conjunction with the general contractor. That's really all we have to base the pricing on. So the pricing is very much of a swag and includes lots of contingencies and escalations for construction in the future. So the next phase would be to draw out the design to 25 to 35%, to do some geotech studies on the site, some various pre-construction services. The goal of the next phase is to give the general contractor and the developer the confidence that they can promise the city a price that will not be exceeded to create this facility. So here is the budget, comes in for, right now, for fundraising planning purposes, about 22.6 million. Site work costs about 2, and that includes all the stormwater management, which I think it has been mentioned, you might be able to apply some funds.
Set aside 700,000 of ARPA money.
That could be applied to that. The building itself, about 10.2 million. All the sports flooring, the goals, the kitchen equipment, the furniture, et cetera, about 2.5 million. Design, soft costs, 2.5. We've got to hire a general contractor. There's going to be fees. We've got a budget of 1.6. Then we put in contingencies and escalations, a fairly hefty number of about 3.6 million. So,
You're costing this not today, but in 2024.
correct, in 2024. Is what we did it originally. But with recent developments of facilities closing nearby, and with the fact that the baseball folks have represented that they don't need the stadium in '23, I put up a schedule here that would allow it to open by the end of '23, provided that certain things happened and happened quickly. And so I think in earlier meetings, when I had priced out phase 2, I had guesstimated it at about 400,000. On that 2 slides ago, I think there was a $500,000 number. The idea is that you, at this stage in phase 2, on your site plan, would go to 100% drawings. And you would prepare a site plan so that it were ready for construction. And then as the funding came together, when it came together, you would be able to release that you would be able to release construction almost immediately, so that processes and time periods that ordinarily would run serially, you get to then overlap some of them. So that's just a suggestion, if you guys wanted to be aggressive and try to make 2023 happen. I went way more quickly than I thought I was going to.
I think, I've read through this a couple times, several of us looked at it, staff. I don't think they could have done a more thorough job of talking to the community, looking at all the business models. I think I'm very impressed with the study that they did. I guess the question now is, as we continue to try to find capital to put this plan together, do we want to take a next step and start working on some of this design work that John is suggesting in phase 2? Are we ready to pull that trigger, which is a much bigger step than where we've been? Or are we still going to continue to work on the capital stack, as John calls it, and see where we're at here in a month or so?
I say pull the trigger.
I say pull the trigger.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah.
And we have funding, Michelle has funding lined up for that, if that's what we choose to do, so we would need to have you approve something officially at the next voting session.
Full steam ahead.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Yeah, I'm curious, it's obviously no secret at this point, but, the only venue in our immediate market area is closing. And, for whatever reason, and so I'm just curious, you know, you completed this study during that process,
Yeah.
probably without that knowledge.
So,
And so I'm just curious how that may impact. Obviously, as a user of that facility, I hear it from folks.
Yeah.
But hearing it from folks and having an awareness of what it really means, I don't have that.
So, when we run heat maps, we sometimes take our customer database with zip codes and addresses, and we go to one of the mapping services and figure out where all of our customers come from. So, when we then take that data and apply to a market that we're not yet in, typically, the vast majority of the customers are really, they're gonna be from around here. Now, with that facility closing, you'll get the reverse of what you currently have, which is a whole bunch of folks right now from Hagerstown are driving down to Frederick. But if you were to look at those folks as a percentage of the overall traffic, and I don't know what it is, but if I had to guess, it's maybe lower than you're thinking. And so, it's a shame for all the folks down there and for their facility, but I don't know that it dramatically moves the financial picture for this one. We have a set of assumptions at this stage that we're gonna hit certain percentages of capacity. And so that year 3, that percent of capacity, maybe it moves by a point or two based on there not being competition, at least for the moment anyway, in Frederick. And so if you said, and I'm gonna make this number up, so don't hold me to it. So if my current one is that we're at 90% of capacity, maybe we get to 92 or 93 based on not having competition that may have been drawn away. And the reality is, I think that even if it had stayed open, we certainly would have captured all the Hagerstown people, right? How many of the Frederick people are gonna come up over the mountain to come? The hardcore folks? Yes, but you take hardcore folks as a percent of the overall universe of customers that we have that include all those 3-year-old little kids learning to play soccer, the silver sneakers, walking around the basketball courts in the morning.
Silver sneakers.
I'm using it.
That it's not a high percentage, right?
Yeah.
It's gonna be that competitive athlete and some of the competitive youth athletes.
I'm just curious, I mean, like I said, as a user there, I mean, I can tell you the last few weeks, everything I hear is a 50-50 split. Meaning like 50%, like you could just take a line straight through Frederick County's middle. The people in the western half are gonna come this direction.
Yeah.
If the venue space is available, they're talking about, what's the one, I guess Winchester. And then the other 50%, 25% are split towards Westminster.
Yeah.
Not Winchester. And then the other 25 are looking to go back to Germantown, Gaithersburg. So that's the message I get when I'm down there, is that's sort of how folks, you know,
Sure.
split along those lines.
Well, you know what I may do is see if Tony would give me his customer database and allow me to heat map that.
Yeah.
And find out where everybody is from and see if that would have a significant effect
That'd be interesting.
on the P&L.
Is it public knowledge as to why the facility is closing down in Frederick?
So here's my take on it, and I had a conversation with him, and I'm certainly capable of botching what he told me, but, you know, he wanted to be out of the business, and so spent a long time trying to find a sports buyer. And, you know, for the very reason that we're trying to put together a capital stack that includes low to no cost funding, when you're a private person looking at another private facility and that person wants market rates, it's difficult to go to the city of Frederick and say, hey, you want to partner with me in buying Tony C's place? The city's usually not going to be too interested in doing that. In retrospect, they are, right? They called him like 2 weeks after it was on the market, like, hey, we would have bought it. And so when the industrial users came knocking, which they have been fairly steadily since we've had this bull market in light industrial space.
And by industrial users, you mean?
Light
where-
industrial.
Light industrial, right.
Warehouse
Okay.
users, sorry, yes, warehouse users. They came to him a number that he simply couldn't refuse. And
Not because of a lack of interest or lack of use?
He did
or-
say that when the pandemic came, that it wiped out some percentage
Right.
of his regular teams. We haven't experienced
Right.
that. Or at least where we are right now at the beginning of 2022 with the pandemic almost being 2 years old, and we really started coming out of it almost a year and a half ago. In some areas, all of our businesses are higher than they were in 19.
Right.
There are some of our smaller sports took it on the chin. Our adult field hockey league in Fredericksburg, hopefully none of them are watching on the closed circuit television. They just ran out of gas. You know, it was one of those small leagues, 4, 5, 6 teams every season. And when they didn't play for 6 months, they just stopped coming back. You know, there's little things like that, but in general, our business back. I can't answer the question of why they had what happened there, and I don't know if
I
you
mean, I
have
think
any
that,
insight.
I think that some of that has to do with the local jurisdictional application of rules. I mean,
Yeah.
in other words,
Mandates, you mean, not
well,
rules.
I'm just saying, every county you go to has a different metric of rules, and so if you're drawing from a region-wide perspective, different participants, you know what I mean, have a different comfort level and a different interest level
No
in,
doubt.
in abiding
No
by
doubt.
those rules that are literally county to city, you know what I mean?
And
There
we
is
had-
no uniformity.
And we had that in
to
Virginia where
that.
Virginia's broken up into planning districts, and the health department in each planning district sets the rules for that. And they're usually 4 or 5 counties to each planning district. So in Virginia Beach, the health inspector, we have 2 facilities down there. That health department agent coming out of the pandemic was there in the building, making sure we didn't have any more than 25 people per basketball court.
Right.
The one in Fredericksburg, for whatever reason, other responsibilities, more restaurants, I don't know what, higher case counts, and they're busy at the hospital. They didn't come by once. They didn't come by once. So 2 identical facilities with 2 dramatically different application of the same set of rules. Never mind 2 different sets of rules, same set of rules, different folks applying them. And so that may have had an effect on his business as well. But that closing is in no way an indication of the strength of the demand or the market or the viability
point.
predicated upon a low to no cost.
Right.
capital stack.
That's the point.
Yeah,
Yep,
Let's go.
thank you.
I'll start talking and I won't stop. Okay, so we had the existing consulting agreement, and we'll probably work this out with the procurement folks. We would maybe do an addendum to that
Yes,
with a
to fill
different
out the
scope
vote.
of work that they would then, okay. We'll work on that and work on the rest of the stuff.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
All right, demolition of Municipal Stadium.
Okay, so with the indication from the new baseball team that they will not be using the facility in 2023, I think we're full steam ahead of putting together a contract for demolition based on the direction you gave me last fall. As I put this contract together, I just had a few questions that it would be helpful for some guidance on. And then we'll put it out to bid, and then we'll be back 6 weeks from now probably. And then you'll have to decide if you're ready to pull the trigger on this part of the project too. But the first thing is, as staff, we've been receiving various requests for different items at the facility. Individual seats are one that comes up from time to time. Little leagues want various things like the field tarp, the wall padding, the light towers. That's a little problematic, I think. But different things down there that they're asking for. And I guess typically when we do a demolition contract, we give all this out. We take what we need for other city facilities. Say like you could do something in City Park. We'll take something from that and use it for that. But then everything else is the salvage value goes to the contractor. In this case, I guess my question for you is, do you want us to put together some sort of a program, an auction, using a service, a third-party service to auction off some of these items? Or should we just tell people, go talk to the selected contractor whenever we determine that and let them buy their things from them?
Got a question for you on that portion, on the light towers. I mean, is there a possibility for like Pony League to use them?
So,
I mean, they've been screaming for lights for
yeah.
20 years.
So if the cost of putting in a field light system is this much, I would say the light towers are this much of it.
Right.
You still got to put in foundations, which are very
Right,
expensive. You
right.
still got to run the conduit, the electric, the switch gear.
Gotcha.
All those things add up to this much
What do you
cost.
think about that part?
So yeah, it's good, but it's not even close to getting them where they would need. So
Right.
they'd have to bridge that gap somehow.
Maybe I'll have a conversation, see if they can do some fundraising.
Yeah. It's, probably six-figure money they're talking about.
Yeah.
I think the big question that I would have as it applies to who does what in terms of divesting of materials that third parties may want is, I can definitely see and appreciate community interest in that. I just wouldn't want it to create delay. Because, I'm already reading this, and I'm reading, late summer, we could have the demo done. Obviously, I had greater optimism than that. Even the 6 weeks to get it bid out puts us, in the middle of March.
Yeah.
And so, I guess I was hoping the timeframes were more condensed than that, but, when you look at it, it looks like a big open, park space, but I guess when I look at this picture, after you say that, I'm like, oh, okay, there's a lot of buildings
There's a
there.
lot of buildings there, a lot of
And a lot of stuff
utilities.
that's, nuts and bolted together, you know what I mean?
It's more of a campus than it is a park.
Yeah, and so I'm sure that
Going on.
in order to maximize value, they want to be able to, recyclable value, they want to be able to take it down in a manner that maximizes that. So I get it, I can certainly understand that.
Yeah, and the more you give the contractor salvage rights to, the less it's gonna cost us to tear it down.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I think we need to at least auction off the chairs. That's all I keep hearing. I've gotten so many people say,
Yeah.
can I buy a chair? How do I get a chair? And
Yeah, I think
we
that's it,
auction or-
is picking practical items, and doing that in a more immediate time frame that makes sure that, by the time the demo guy gets there, that we went ahead and taken care of that
Yep,
component.
yep.
I don't want it to be a hybrid where we put that on them and then they're sitting out in the parking lot.
Right.
You know what I mean?
We don't either.
Like, that to me seems messy.
Just wanna do the seats, the orange seats that have been there for decades.
The
That's a
front
very
ones.
manageable thing.
Yeah, the VIP seat.
Yeah, the VIP seat.
Yeah, no.
Well, really,
nobody
what
wants
else
to
is there? I
lose.
guess the markers, the things that say Municipal Stadium, if people want to bid on those, or,
I'd say do the, field length, at the wall, but
Listen.
pricing went down.
We just don't want to get into when, when the old Bester was torn down, they did a fundraiser and sold bricks. We don't want to get into that.
Yeah.
But I
At least
do-
as a city, we don't want to get into that,
If we wanna
but
keep
No,
this
I don't.
moving.
I do have a buddy that constantly hounds me about getting Brooks Robinson's, I guess, face on one of the cinder blocks. I don't even know where that's at, or,
I'm not
but,
sure.
so I just give you, I'd use that idea that you pointed out.
yeah, but individual bricks, we don't want
But
to get
man,
into
there's
that.
no way.
No, I would prefer not.
Yeah.
Tell you that. Okay, so the seats, the VIP seats would be something we would auction off.
What about the stuff in the front? The most recent addition that was done
Like the
back in,
fencing and all
like that decorative entry area.
Yeah, we could.
I don't know, I
I
just,
would say that should go to the contractor. One thing that we definitely want to get is the 3 shade canopies. We could
Oh, yeah.
utilize those somewhere else. So that would be something that the city would salvage and use in another park.
I have complete faith that you guys will,
Yeah,
And
figure it
right-
out.
yeah,
We'll
rightly
have a
pick
list of
those
things
things.
like that, yeah.
Yeah.
But
I
fencing
don't want
and,
involved in microing that at all.
Plaques are still up, right?
there are a lot of historic plaques down
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
that-
I just think you guys will go in and say yes, be able to say
I
yes or
think we'll
no.
keep the plaques, maybe they could be put in the field house, or,
Yeah.
as a little area,
Yeah,
just
it
as
could be
a,
something, yeah. It could be reused something.
tip of the hat to what the facility
There's
used
a lot
to
of
be.
creative
There
things
you
we could
go.
do with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Are you guys good with moving forward?
Yeah.
Yes.
Was that the only thing, right? You have a couple more on there.
Is there a reason it's 6 weeks, that's just our regular time frame?
I think I need at least 4 weeks
Okay.
to be fair to the bidders, and
I
I'm
got you.
afraid I'm gonna get a lot of questions when we get this out
Oh,
there.
I
there's
got
gonna
you,
be-
yeah.
So I need the time to respond to them to make sure we have a fair bid. Yeah, just on the field, we were gonna leave the field there, it would grow up. Everything else, though, will be torn down, so it'll look like a baseball field inside of what the Pangborn site looks like, just basically be the concourses and everything. We're gonna leave them there until this project of John's comes along, and then we'll get all that cleaned up. Yep,
At least if it floods, it's not a big deal.
it won't be a big deal, exactly.
It doesn't flood.
Okay.
The culvert gets too full and the drain pipes can't outlet.
And then the water comes over.
Oh, the water just backs up.
And then it's called flood.
You used to call it the Bridgie Fountain there in the parking lot.
It's called.
So just,
Walk through it hip high. I know, it's a flood.
just one clarifying question on the auction. So one of the things that we could do to help time frame-wise on that end is we currently already utilize a company called Public Surplus. Only governmental agencies are able to put their used items on this site. Anybody and everybody can log on to this site. They have to create their own accounts and they can purchase
Or
them.
BizGov or whatever?
I'm sorry.
Or is that a separate one? We use BizGov or whatever it's called.
It's, BizGov is separate. I forget what the name was
Okay.
before it became Public Surplus. The word government used to be in the title. We
If you
utilize
think
that
that's
site.
easy to do, let's do it.
Yeah, I
Well, this
agree.
way, we could get the pictures, we could start running that. Otherwise, we have to bid and find a local auctioneer, if that's what you're wishing to do, or this way,
As long as anyone can purchase it, I think that's really
They
the most
can.
important thing.
I
They
like the
can.
virtual approach.
they just have to create their own account. They're responsible for delivery.
Just make sure we do some promoting.
So people know about it.
Yeah.
Okay,
So anyone in the public can access this site?
yes, and create an account.
And we'd have
That's
the
the easy
time,
way to do
obviously.
it.
Yep.
Or a league or any nonprofit.
Plus you got the budget for it.
So, just to be clear, outside those seats, the orange seats, everything else will go to the contractor. So if the Little League wants those lights, he's gonna go to the contractor. Right?
That's fine.
From my perspective, that's the right thing to do.
And scoreboard.
That's fine.
I mean, it isn't like third parties can't reach out to them.
Exactly.
Right.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. City Administrator,
I'm good, Mayor, thank you.
Councilmember Tiara.
Oh, I have just one thing. Last week, I participated in a panel discussion at Northern Middle School regarding Black leaders in STEM, business, art, challenges, you name it. It was a really cool experience to be back into the halls of Northern Middle. It's only been like 5 years ago for me. No, just kidding. The kids, like always, had really, really great questions. And it was cool for me to wear both hats, as in, a council member and someone involved in the science industry for over 14 years now. And Tribe Called Juice Press Bar, I might have had it messed up. They attended also, and they had a really cool perspective on math. So they were pushing for pay attention to math because now that they have this juice bar, they're measuring like spinach and how much is one orange cost and how ounces of water or smoothie stuff, the whole business of it. So it was really cool. And that's all.
Thank you. Kristen?
I don't
Keisha? All right, I don't either. Everyone have a good night. We're adjourned.
Yeah, get out.
Hello and welcome to Council Wrap. I'm Wes Decker, joined by City Engineer Rodney Tissue. Rodney, some big news. I mean, it's exciting thinking about this Hagerstown Fieldhouse, and certainly seeing the presentation from John Wack of Eastern Sports Management tonight, getting some of those results back from phase 1 of the study. I guess my first question to you is, what's your biggest takeaway from what they came back with from those results?
I think my biggest takeaway is let's get moving.
Yeah.
There's very clear that the council has this as one of their top priorities of this administration, is to get this project moving. I think the study came back with that I think they did a tremendous job on, a very thorough job. They talked to hundreds of people in the community. There's a need for these kind of facilities here. We haven't had one. A city this size should have one. And I think this council feels that it's just a priority for this community to get this done.
Yeah, I think their response tonight certainly echoed that. They wasted no time in saying, let's move forward to phase 2. So can you sort of underscore what phase 2 entails? Certainly, John laid it out during the meeting, but can you kind of give us a thumbnail sketch of what happens next?
Yeah, so I would say in general, after the council approves the phase 2 contract, we start doing actual design drawings. And we take those to maybe 35% completion so that very accurate cost estimates can be done of what the facility is actually going to cost. Those cost estimates then will be used by Eastern Sports Management to give us a guaranteed maximum price so that if there's any overruns beyond that number, it's on them. So they're going to take the risk for that. So they need to take the drawings far enough along to get that estimate. They'll do geotechnical work, actually drilling in the ground to see what the soil conditions are. And then one of the other important parts of this will be putting together the beginning of the operating agreement. They're going to have a lease with the city. They are going to be on the hook for making payments to the city, and all that needs to be spelled out in a very detailed lease that the beginnings of will be started in this next phase. Other things would be just continue to, excuse me, I got sneezed.
Oh, bless you.
I got it. Continue to, stay in touch with people that would use the facility in the market. And, but the more primary thing would be the preliminary design.
What's the timeline for the city arriving at a funding source for this project?
We're hoping in the next few weeks.
Wow, okay.
There's a lot of discussions going on at the state level that we're hoping that we can still see funding there. The federal level, there's some opportunities there that we're trying to pursue. The city will have some debt in this, but the goal is to try to make that number as low as possible. If those things come together, then I think this facility could open at the end of next year.
Wow, that's crazy. I mean,
yeah.
Because when I saw that up there, I was like, okay, the end of 2023, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's the end of next year, just
Yeah.
like you said. So,
Yeah.
man, there's no fooling around on this.
Right, and that would be predicated on getting the capital together.
Yeah.
As it is. If not, I think it would get delayed a year until we continue to go after that funding.
When you think about, and I know some of this is still in the preliminary stages, and it will become more firm as we move into phase 2 and beyond. But as far as the preliminary design and sort of the footprint for this, 114,000 square feet, 2 stories, all of that, is this sort of what, and I know it wasn't necessarily your vision, but at the same time, is this sort of what you envisioned when this was discussed in terms of a field house like this?
Well, I think primarily we started out with 2 turf fields, indoor turf fields, which is similar to what they had in Frederick. But it became pretty clear pretty quickly as we talked to the community that there was so much other need for basketball and volleyball and futsal, I guess they call it, the indoor soccer program that's not played on turf and different things like that. There's no place to play those sports that is readily available for a lot of these programs. So it grew into having those 4 basketball courts. That also then allows for sports tourism. That's what I heard John say tonight is the sports tourism portion of this, which is an economic driver. Those things would happen on the weekends, and those would primarily be on that hard court side.
Right.
Some on the turf side.
Yeah.
But that's mostly going to be for our local kids to play soccer and lacrosse and those kind of things on.
Yeah, I mean, he talked about camps and clinics and leagues and tournaments, so there's nothing that, won't fall under the auspices of this field house. I mean, the possibilities are endless for sure. And I think one of the things that is really encouraging about this is something that we've known for years, and anyone who's paid attention to the youth sports landscape, we've seen everyone leave Hagerstown to go do this, and now everyone will be coming here. And I think what I'm getting at is there's an interesting facet to all of this that probably gets lost because, yes, you have those organizations who are looking at the hard courts or the turf fields, and that's their main concern. But some of the other things that he talked about as far as food and beverage and things like that make this a viable facility. Can you sort of speak to that a little bit? Because I think people are missing that to some degree. It's probably not as important to them, but it is in the long run, again, in terms of making this a sustainable facility.
Yeah, I mean, I have two daughters. They're older now, but when they were younger, they would have played a facility like this. Say the one was playing in a volleyball tournament. The other one might be with me and looking for something to do. So what would that be? Those other things that you're talking about would be the restaurant. It would be a kids zone, which would be like climbing walls and an arcade and things like that. It would be the esports lounge that is just tremendously growing in popularity that a lot of us don't even appreciate how much gaming and those kind of things are popular now. So there'll be an area for that. There'll be a fitness area. So all those kind of collateral uses will be there that people can use if they're just hanging out waiting for their next game to happen, or if they have other children that want to get involved in something while the other child is playing. So all those kind of things like that. I could see the fitness center also being used just by the community and people having memberships there and that kind of stuff.
And then we talk about the location for this, and that was sort of the second part of the discussion, a separate agenda item, but certainly the demolition of Municipal Stadium. And something, again, that the council members were quick to say, let's go ahead and move forward with that, because certainly that paves the way for the field house to move into the second phase and beyond. Anything surprise you there with the way that they responded to the questions that you asked about Municipal Stadium in terms of, what's there, how they want to do this, what will happen with some of those things that the public has asked for?
Yeah. No real surprises. We're going to try to keep it as simple as possible. The only thing that we're really going to put up for public auction are the VIP seats, the orange seats, as I call them. Other things there, we're just going to give all those demolition salvage rights to the contractor. That contractor, whoever that's going to turn out to be, can sell those items, give those items away. That's up to them, but it keeps it simple for us as a local government that, we're just going to try to do something that's manageable. Aside from that, though, we're also going to take some items out of that facility that will be used in other facilities. For example, we're getting ready to build a new bathroom facility in City Park. We'll take some of the brand-new toilets and new bathroom facilities that are out at Municipal Stadium. We'll take them out, we'll salvage them, and we'll put them in that new facility. The field tarp, we'll use that at Fairgrounds Park. Those kind of things that the city will use in other facilities, then we'll auction off these seats, and the rest of the salvage value goes to the contractor. That seems like a very manageable decision that they gave us tonight.
Yeah, in light of the fact that, Municipal Stadium has been around for as long as it has, certainly some historical significance to some, and there are some markers over there and things of that nature. I was thinking to myself, and obviously I have no dog in the fight, nobody's asking me my opinion on this, but I'm just thinking, with the new stadium being built downtown, and even though that is not a city project, at the same time, that seems like a real arena where the appreciation for baseball would live on. So maybe the possibility of some of that memorabilia, some of those things like that might show up there. I think also mentioned that perhaps at the field house too, just to sort of preserve, the fact that we had, one of the oldest stadiums, but at the same time had become no longer functional. Certainly a minor in Major League Baseball have been saying that for years. There's no question about it. But still, not to say that, hey, we don't remember that it was there and what the site was for it.
Right. I think there could be a wall in the new field house that would have some information about kind of a tip of the hat to what facility used to be there. And maybe some of these plaques could be salvaged, although they're in pretty poor condition.
Yeah.
I do want to say that Municipal Stadium's not historic. There's been baseball played there for decades.
Right.
No argument about that. But the facility that's there, the grandstands from the 1980s, the clubhouse is from the 1990s, some of the bleachers are from the 1940s, the outfield wall is probably from like the 1920s. But the facility itself is a hodgepodge of things that have been put together there over the last 50 years.
Yeah,
So I wouldn't call that historic.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't have used that word technically. I think what it is, there's a lot of history that's been made in that stadium.
I don't argue that at all.
Yeah, and for a lot of people, I think it comes down to nostalgia.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
No question.
I appreciate that,
hey,
you know.
those memories will live on without a doubt. But I think there are a lot of memories that are going to be made in this particular field house. I think we're making the best of a property that at this point has sort of outlived its usefulness.
Yeah.
So, I look forward to this next chapter.
Yeah, the facility is in poor condition. If it hasn't been professional baseball played there now for 3 years.
Right.
There's been no money invested in the facility for at least that long.
Yeah.
The paint is peeling. The field needs completely regraded, which is at least a $100,000 project. The field lights need relamped. HVAC units aren't working. The roofs are leaking in some of the buildings. It could go on and on and on. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars of deferred maintenance there to bring a facility that is kind of pieced together over time up to a usable level.
Yeah,
And
no question.
when people go out there and they look at it, they go, oh, this is in worse shape than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
They have a picture in their minds of what it looked like 5 years ago, at a Suns game. It doesn't look like that now.
No, because that was at a time when all of that upkeep was done on a
By the
regular
Suns.
basis. Yeah, and
Their lease required
the
them to do
investment by the tenant, the
Right,
main tenant,
exactly.
to make that happen. So anyway, I'm very excited about the prospects of the field house. I think just the change of landscape in so many ways, and just the fact that we're going to see so many people using that facility, as you said. We're not just marketing this to people outside. I mean, we have an opportunity for everyone here to use this to some degree
First
too.
and foremost,
So
it's for our community.
Exactly.
It's not
exactly.
about bringing in tournaments.
Right.
That's a side,
Yep.
secondary benefit of it, but this
Yeah.
is for especially the young people of our community.
Yes.
I feel like everybody you talk to about this, everybody has a story about taking their kids to X, Y, and Z. I took my kids up to Camp Hill to play indoor soccer. Everybody has a story that those stories could be, we played at the Hagerstown Fieldhouse.
Right.
Going forward.
Yeah, how cool will that be?
How cool will that be?
Yeah, when that's the place that people
Yeah.
remember so fondly
Right.
about their kids
Or
doing this or that.
People out far away will
Right.
say, we go to Hagerstown.
Yeah, and
on
those,
the weekends.
and those athletic fish stories that just get bigger and bigger as the years go by, as the
Exactly.
families get together. So,
Yeah.
looking forward to that. Thank you very much, Rodney. Appreciate it. And thanks to all of you for watching. For tonight, that's a wrap. We'll see you next time on the city's social media platforms and Hub City Now.